Hello there, and welcome to the Camo Net Podcast. I am your host, Bambi Sandy. Was going to be joined. I do actually have co-hosts. They're just always busy. Was going to be joined by Sebev. I say that different every time, but he got busy last second, and I didn't want to procrastinate putting out content. Especially in the lead up to ARCL Season 2 starting. There's just a lot to kind of get through before I kind of shift modes into like match analysis and team stuff. Shout out to this garbage background. Most of my backgrounds are just sort of like stale. Like go into Game Master in a little one-man private server and take like something scenic. I wanted my screenshot to be from an actual game, and it just looks like garbage, right? So just gonna roll with it. Just gotta be authentic to a degree. Anyways, we are with a group called Camo Net Supremacy, covering Armor Reforger and the competitive community for the game that will be expanding to other games in the genre, like Hell Let Loose and Squad at some point. I'm actually talking to a couple of people right now, specifically for Squad. You can call that laziness, so that way I don't have to step back into Squad. They're interested in specifically covering that game from a game analysis point, so really excited for that. If you represent a team in the competitive community or believe that you'd be a good candidate for an interview, you can join our Discord through the link in the description and reach out that way. Keep in mind that it's not a literal link. You just have to copy and paste it into Discord. YouTube's got that age thing where you can't have hyperlinks in your description until your account's a certain age. So the aim of the Discord is to have a space outside of a specific tournament host or a team for the community to interact with one another. We're planning to hold our first community debate this weekend with a range of topics. We have actually already announced the topics. Take pride in supporting honest and critical opinions with both game and the scene as a whole. So if you'd like to participate in pushing the competitive culture for the game in a positive direction, please do join. Discord is intended for anyone participating in the scene at any level. It should serve as a nice backup tool in case of an emergency. So everyone from leadership, if you're a team rep, or if you're just a Joe. That way, if you wake up and find that your team's disintegrated overnight, you can rely on this unbiased space to reach out for another one. Camo Net Supremacy is a collective media project for the community and scene. It won't ever host its own tournament. This is meant to be kind of like an independent thing that just services the community at large. Our content doesn't feature crazy overlays or editing purposefully, so aside from technical issues and bits on the front and back end of the recordings, we leave everything in the middle for transparency. So just kind of an aside before we step into this. First of all, this is going to be a long one. This is going to be a barn burner, probably an hour and a half, 2 hours long. There's something to say about the wisdom of breaking things into more manageable chunks. So this probably would be better as two separate podcast episodes, maybe 50 minutes long each. As we're kind of starting out, though, first of all, I don't give a fuck about demographics. Second of all, so like if I lose people at like an hour into the video, whatever. Secondly, most of the people that are genuinely watching these things, I know watch them all the way through. They sit down when they have a chunk of time to work through them. So that's not a concern. Thirdly, the people that do watch the videos all the way through, regardless of kind of length, are sort of the people that I want to have an impact on, right? So if you're Joe Schmo and I'm talking about something kind of nerdy that you don't really give a fuck about, like, chances are that's fine. You're not the person that I was trying to impress upon. So this one's going to be a little bit longer. I was debating on it, and I'm not trying to inflate my like watch hours or whatever the fuck. And again, I don't care about demographics. So I just decided to kind of, I've got all the information right now, just put it all into one episode as opposed to like coming out with one episode today and then waiting 4 days to come out with another one that just doesn't really seem right to me. It also doesn't really seem genuine. So, stepping into this, we're going to get started with the ARCL Season 2 bracket announcement that just recently occurred, and then we'll get into proper sort of podcast topics. If no one kind of knows by this point, it'll be very evident with this episode. I have no official standing or relationship with ARCL as an organization. I'm just serving like an analysis and a journalism role for the community. That doesn't have anything to do with any specific tournament host. So you're going to hear me say some potentially negative things about this, and some downsides that probably RCL doesn't really give a fuck about as an organization. That's fine. Just saying the things that kind of need to be said for the culture. So, stepping into this, if you haven't seen the video that I did on that, they had said that they were going to do a recording and upload their own recording of the announcement. I haven't seen that. Maybe I'm just missing it, or maybe because I uploaded my recording of it, they didn't feel like they needed to. So if there is another recording, I don't know about it. I'm just speaking in reference to what kind of I'd seen and said. But anyways, if you haven't seen that and you're just an ordinary Joe or you weren't there for it, should be publicly posted on this channel. It's just a little bit of commentary in the lead up to the event starting, and then I added some thoughts and stuff in real time after it had finished. But there's a chunk in the middle where I didn't say anything, so if you just want to hear what was going on, you don't give a fuck about my opinions, that's there as like an exclusionary thing. You don't have to hear me talk or anything. So the first point that I kind of took away from the announcement event, in general, it's really interesting to see the bracket announcement as an event for the community for a couple of reasons, I'd say. In Squad, I'd always kind of felt that a live announcement would have made for a better experience for a lot of the tournaments. It's more engaging, at least from like a team rep position. Because then as a team rep, if you were out of the loop for a little while, or you weren't included in the conversations of balancing decisions on something, if a vehicle's being included, or if a map layer changed last second or something like that, or you got put into the wrong bracket, or you want an ability to change brackets, it gives you a moment or an opportunity to raise kind of concerns for stuff like team seating as well, or even dates, immediately. Yeah, in the moment. Typically, tournaments would drop like a vague picture of the brackets and say like, hey, this is what it ended up being. And each individual team or team rep would have to spam kind of the tournament staff to address issues on an individual basis. So like if the bracket came out and you were slated to play your first match on the 3rd week of August or something like that, but that wasn't available for you, and you want to see if you can like swap with another team, for their date or their weekend or whatever, you would have to reach out on an individual level, and then the staff would get 20 different messages that were sort of like that. So doing it as an event means that everyone's kind of like there and able to work that stuff out all in one place at one time. So that's kind of cool. That's some stuff that I'd kind of wanted in Squad. So, short of that, though, this is a pretty easy kind of devil's advocate, low-hanging philosophical question to ask there. In what's the purpose for the event, or what's driving the event? There's no culture or expectations to really play off of or spur, since the community's still really young. Obviously season 2 insinuates that there was a season 1, but for people that don't know, season 1 was a really big mess, and like leadership changed hands and staffing roles were kind of wonky. So this is, it's being called season 2, but this is effectively like the start of a thing, right? So there's not a whole lot of hype to build up, because most of the teams that are participating in Season 2 haven't done this before. It'd be interesting to see some sort of like polling or data, actually, on whether most groups are even interested in competitive culture to begin with, or if they're simply just groups that are adding to a widespread range of events throughout the year, right? Um, how many of these people even care who they're facing, right? If this is just synonymous, you know, I'm gonna avoid making references to actual teams or organizations because like I don't know who any of these fucking people are, and that's part of the problem. Is like, who the fuck are these people? If I'm community A, if I'm community A and I've got 3 public servers, 2 of them are modded, one of them's vanilla. We do like one life events, and then we do like some proper milsim stuff on a Vietnam server, and then we're doing this, right? Do I really care about like who the teams are? And oh man, we got matched up to play our first match against this really good team. Oh man, that's going to be a real struggle. Or do people really not give a fuck? I would just point out that like it's something to ask. I don't know what the value of the question is really, but it's something to point out of like if the majorities of the people that are participating in this thing don't give a fuck, then maybe don't hold it as an event in the future. This says something to like an unhealthiness in the community, or like, is this even really a competitive community at that point? But so that's, I think, kind of worth mentioning. And then that's not really like my attempt to be negative, as like I said initially, I'm actually a fan of having it as an event, because just because the culture doesn't exist now doesn't mean that it's not going to gain value later. If this is sort of like a traditional thing where, hey, the first couple are probably going to be duds and pointless, and people probably won't care all that much to like actually show up to the event or participate. They'll just see the bracket, picture, or the results of the announcement later. But then, value and meaning and lore can be worked to a better degree. I'm fine with the event. It's interesting, and it's worthwhile, stimulating to ask kind of like, what is the value of this thing now, and what kind of problems does this sort of represent or reveal? It's important to be philosophical about shit that probably doesn't need philosophy all the time. My second issue that I kind of had brought up, the seeding of the actual bracket. So this is a mixture of a response both from the event and then my initial messaging of staff when I first joined the ARCL Discord and I was trying to get my bearings and stuff, was that there will be no separation of teams based on skill. So at least for this season, there's a couple of things that are sort of rough here. Not necessarily wrong, but just rough. On one hand, you're going to have, the gulf between probably the top 3 teams. This is all assumptive, because who fucking knows who these teams are and how well people actually play and what skill level everyone's on. But, the gulf between the top 3 teams and the next probably 4 teams is probably big, really huge. The buy-in is just completely different. You're talking about like people that just have exponentially more time to play the game, they care about it way more. This always ends up showing as a divide between Euro players and NA players, because NA players don't give a fuck about anything, really. Historically, anyways. So putting all those people in the same bracket is almost wasting sort of the lesser team's time, right? You've got the majority versus the minority. Well, the minority ends up being like the super fucking good teams that are just going to smash everyone in like the first 3 matches, right? And then they're always going to make it to the semifinals or whatever the fuck. What does that mean for the teams that are kind of like going against them, right? Is there going to be a losers bracket? Okay, well, if you're going to set a losers bracket, why didn't you just account for skill to begin with? Because now, like, that's more engaging for the majority of the people that are kind of at that lower level, right? Obviously, this is like the first proper, like I said, season for ARCL that doesn't feature like a a change of leadership or whatever, they can just focus on the season as it's going and then maintain it all the way through. So it's kind of rough, to be fair. Two balanced teams that probably haven't even played in this thing before, right? Super majorities of the people that are participating in season 2 didn't participate in season 1, right? So it would probably be rough to try to evaluate and set team standing and skill levels for seeding the bracket or various brackets if people haven't even done this thing before. I'm not too sure that that's a good excuse though, because you can just feel out teams when they apply where they stand on your spectrum with polling or interviewing, right? Because you already have to apply into the tournament and answer some variation of questions and stuff to even get in. So that's your opportunity right there to feel that out. It's pretty easy to feel out whether people are bullshitting you or not, because you'll just ask, have you ever done scrimmages before? No? You've never played against another team in a competitive context, okay? You're a low-tier team. If the answer is yes, you're probably a mid-tier or a high-tier team. You can feel out, how much time do your guys really kind of spend with the game? We play the game every day. We roam from server to server to server, and we just love smashing it out. Our favorite servers are actually the harder servers to play on, where, we'll kind of stack up on one side if we see that the other team has a lot of clan tags, or, that's the home server's team all playing together, and we love that team's probably a higher tier team because they're talking about actively seeking challenge, not just stomping fucking blueberries that are just trying to have fun for 20 minutes, right? You can feel that stuff out. So I don't think that that's necessarily a good talking point. Good to bring up though. My third issue, they announced that initially there was going to be a lightweight, a middleweight, and a heavyweight. The lightweight was going to be played as 10v10s on Arland. The middleweight was going to be 20v20s on Everon, and then they had said that the heavyweight options were also going to be on Everon for people that wanted to bring more than 20 people. So they announced that heavyweight options, they didn't have enough people for it, and that the heavyweight teams were going to get folded into the middleweight bracket. But that teams that were able to bring more than 20 players to their matches would be allowed to, as long as the opposing team for that match also did the same. So if my first match for season 2, I can bring more than 20 people. Say I've got 40 people that signed up for the event, and I talk to the other team for that match and ask hey, we've got roughly 40 people that we can bring to the table. Do you want to do something higher than a 20v20? And they're like, yeah, we've got 30 people that can show up. I'm like, okay, let's make it my 30 people against your 30 people, right? That is effectively what they're saying is now allowed, or is going to happen. But if, a team approaches me for the match coming this weekend and says, hey, we've got 30 people and I just only have 20, then I'll say nah, I can only manage 20. Then it would just be the ordinary 20v20. This completely fucks the integrity of the bracket because it changes the platform that everyone's working from. And I'm probably going to lose some people here, and this probably isn't going to be popular. So if I don't articulate this well, just give it some time, settle with it. You're probably going to come around to my perspective. Okay. More players per team per match means that you need less skill in those matches per capita. The difference between me sending 10 guys to an objective and 20 guys to an objective is vast. Now the people on that objective don't need to perform as well because they've probably got I don't need to hit all my shots because I've got a guy that wouldn't otherwise be there standing next to me to hit the shots that I missed, right? The map sizes and objective counts aren't going to scale to account for the number of players on Everon, right? So if you elect to bring more players into a match, even if the other team does the same, now you've got more bodies to throw at a center objective or an objective past that, which means that you'd probably win a match that you might otherwise lose because you can just throw more bodies at the problem, right? 10v10s are arguably more consequential and skill intensive than 20v20s, even if the map and like the objective count is different, because you need more right to go right. Why did I say that like that? With 10 people, if that's all you've got to work with versus 20. And again, I would just reiterate, like if you've got more bodies to throw at a problem or more people to account for an aspect or a region or whatever the fuck, then you just don't need more to work out there. There's a potential there for really big skill disparities. It would be different if it was like, hey, people that wanted to do the heavyweight option, if both people agree, if Team A and Team B are playing this Saturday, and they both want to bring 30 people instead of 20, we're going to add an objective, or like a side objective now, to the map. So that way, like the average player count on each objective is the same. Then I'd kind of be okay with it, but even then, like, there's a reason that you're having everyone play through the same bracket. It's weird from a standing perspective that, like, this team over here is playing a different game or different calculations than this team elsewhere in the bracket, right? Even if when those teams play each other, if they play each other, it's only going to be the standard 20v20. If that makes sense. Again, I'm probably going to lose people here, but just kind of, if the whole idea is that, like, hey, all teams in this bracket are going to work with access to the same guns over the same objectives, the same maps, and then the winner is determined by, like, given those shared tools, who was able to work it better. Well, you're inherently fucking that. The degree to which I'm not arguing is like world ending. That's probably going to be opinion based, but you are inherently screwing that even footing for the bracket if you allow people to elect into like a different experience, because you will have teams and moments where fights are only won because there's an extra guy standing there that wouldn't have otherwise been standing there. You will disenfranchise some people. To what degree, again, but that's for further discussion. I'd love to field counterpoints to that. This kind of issue, a considerable bit of what I think is important with journalism for this space, for this community, is just because there are 19 other problems over here that are probably pretty big doesn't mean that you don't mention this one small problem over here, right? It's like talking about how unbalanced and open Everon is as a map. All the engagement distances, the incentive structure that the map offers is always tuned for like sniping and really far away play. It's like saying that that's not something legitimate to talk about because the ordinary gunplay, like the core gunplay, even if you were playing on a different map, is so out of whack and needs tuning and adjustment. You should still be able to talk about the issues with Everon, right? So, devil's advocate, I get it. There are other issues to probably address first in this space than, especially when you're talking about, like, again, skill disparities already within the bracket, merc expectations, right? that I could go from, say, it hasn't happened yet. It will. Most of my issues with mercs and coalitions and stuff like that ARCL have said that they don't really care about. It's not currently a problem. I'm telling you, this is going to age like fine wine. Next fucking year, it's going to be a huge problem. Because there's going to be a team that couldn't field 20 people for the 20v20s, but they don't want to play on Ireland. So this team is just going to decide, like, well, we just won't participate this year as a team. We'll just all be mercs. So there will be instances where a 10v10 team is like, hey, your 10 guys, can play with us to be in this 20v20. And what does the win for that team now mean if half their fucking team isn't actually like them? So anyways, moving on. Got a lot of ground to cover. My fourth issue that kind of came up from this, it was communicated that there were some armor balancing issues and questions to answer weeks before the tournament starts. Even with the week extension that they just announced, the tournament was going to start on July 25th, and they pushed it to the next weekend. That's a structural, philosophical thing that should have been outlined weeks ago, if not months. For instance, Season 1 is almost finished, and vehicle balance has been a really big issue. We should probably just limit stuff down to 1 or 2 base game lavs for the next season. That's how long ago this question should have been answered. So to see it this kind of late in the game is really, really concerning. Armor complaints typically come from a couple of different places. Usually it's just 2, okay? If you think about, absolute root philosophical, what's the issue here? Or what issues can arise? What really makes that feel bad in a game, in a match? And I'll tell you, it's restrictions on agency, like being able to do something or being able to deal with the armor, and indirect damage. And I just didn't hear anything that insinuated kind of a recognition of those aspects, which might have just been a time and place thing. And 2, I get it. Most of the time I'm the only person that's really thinking about philosophical root cause shit, but whatever. And I'll delve into that, I suppose, to legitimize the talking point. It's more of a, it's more easily seeable. Sorry for a squeaky chair. It's easier to see in public matches, conceptually, but, if you're on an objective, right, say this is within the context or the framework of a match in Season 2, right? Match starts, both teams roll from main. Both teams send people to the center objective to fight over, because the only thing that matters in ARCL is map control. Not gunplay, not how well you performed, just sitting on the objective. Both teams send people to the center objective. Team 1 only sends infantry guys. They get to the objective first. Team 2 sends a couple of infantry guys and a lav, right? All that lav has to do is sit on an appropriate hill, probably at distance, because it's going to be on Everon. And now no one on Team 1, or on the center objective that got there first, can fucking move? Because if they peek the armor, they're going to get schwacked. So you just, you're just sitting there? You just can't do anything? You have to wait for someone else on your team to, go deal with the armor before you can fucking move around or, change stuff? So that fucking sucks. Especially since the majority of what you want the match to be is infantry-centric. My 5 guys went and walked the distance to go attack that objective. If we could just teleport there, that would be fucking dumb and kind of gamey, right? Infantry-centric. It should be about, earning things through gunfighting and, having more skill than the guy that was on the other end of his rifle. Then indirect damage is sort of the more perverse issue that comes from armor, and I would assume that it's why the lav was chosen instinctually over the BTR, because the lav just starts with the explosive ammo for the main gun. The BTR, you have to like load that in, right? You have to kind of go out of your way to set that. Indirect damage is fucking horseshit. You will not find a bigger hater for explosives in this game than me, especially in a competitive context. I don't think that should be relevant. I don't think that anti-personnel mines should be in competitive. What's the consequence there? Just wrong place, wrong time? You didn't kill the guy 20 minutes ago as he was setting him fucking down? Come on. Same thing, even arguably, with the grenadier role. At least you have to be within, like, grenade throwing range to throw grenades. I don't even like those. Because what's the answer to that, right? If I'm inside of a building and I'm holding an angle, I know that the enemy knows that I'm here. I've killed a couple of guys, right? I have good positioning. I know that I can kill probably the first couple of guys that come through the door before I have to reload or something. You're on the outside of the building. All you have to do is throw a grenade, and then I just die. You didn't need skill or opportunity or, like, know-how. You could have just maybe killed me through a window or pushed in through a different doorway. Or you could have fucking thrown a smoke grenade and then, you know, pushed through the smoke or fucking... You get what I'm saying? Like, it's not about actually having skill. It's just about, like, convenience and happenstance. Same thing, especially with armor that can shoot at range, with the concept of a round. Same thing with RPGs, right? With a round that can kill you from around a corner. That guy doesn't need to see you. He's just gonna spam the sandbag above your head. He's gonna hit the fucking corner of the building. Every window, every doorway, every entry. Like, he doesn't... Every bush. He doesn't need to know that you're there. He's just combing through the area. How do you feel when you fucking die to that? You feel like shit, right? Why are we allowing that in? It would be considerably different. You know, there's a potential to fix this here. Just remove this talking point from my lexicon for Season 2. You just say, hey, the lav's going to be the piece of armor, but it's not allowed to have explosive rounds. It's just the coax gun and then the ordinary, like, armor-piercing ammo for lodges or whatever the fuck. But that won't be a thing, right? Also, you can extrapolate, because there's not going to be any limitations on ordinary infantry rolls. There's probably not going to be any limitations on how many helicopters or how many armor pieces you can have on the map. So, like, in the context of the example that I'd given earlier, where, like, start of the match... Both teams move from main. Both teams go to the center objective to duke it out, while other people on their teams, you know, back cap to support that fight, right? In, you know, after the fact. If both teams... What's to stop just armor being there, right? 5 lavs against 5 other lavs. What if both teams refuse to do, like, infantry play? Is that a dynamic that we want? Then you circle back to, well, those 3 teams higher up on the bracket or elsewhere in the bracket won because they just stomped the other team with armor. What does that mean if we don't play armor? Like, so we're probably just gonna lose those matches? Maybe that's kind of a shit talking point right there at the end, but... The 5th issue that I had from the bracket announcements, I took the opportunity, based on some stuff that I'd heard from both staff and people that participated in Season 1, that a considerable bit of what made that feel wrong and wonky and, like, not set up and not professional, quote-unquote professional, right, was rule and balance changes that would happen, like, an hour before a match. You know, hey, we've decided that this weapon's too overpowered, so we're just going to remove it. Like, an hour before your match. There was no, like, grace period. So I asked into that, and I got a punt to the rules, which inherently is a channel that can be updated with edited text. So what the actual fuck does that mean? Rule and balance changes for Season 2 can and will likely affect matches mid-tournament in the same way that they happened in Season 1. I've explicitly gotten the feedback from staff that they will go through if there's a very clear meta, if everyone on every team is only using like the RSAS, or everyone's only using one specific light machine gun. They will go through and they will remove or nerf that weapon to prompt like a better spread of what everyone's doing. I already know that. If anyone wants, I can send them the fucking messages and the feedback explicitly saying that if no one believes me. Not that that's an advertisement, but weapons, vehicles, and equipment will change if the meta's too singular. Again, mention that. I actually think that that was from the ARCL staff interview, the video. But that fucks with the integrity of the bracket too, right? Because teams are going to have standing based on the stuff that you just removed from the game now. So what does that mean? Would those teams have won if they weren't using that weapon before? But now teams have to deal with the standings where they're at. Like, what if one team lost explicitly because the other team was only using the one-hit kill power weapon, the RSAS, you know? We know for a fact from testing that even though they nerfed the RSAS and removed full auto, you can still set up macros and click really fucking fast, even if you're not using the macros. So it basically has full auto still, right? If everyone's using the RSAS, and I'm on a team where I didn't use the RSAS and I lost, and then you go through and remove the RSAS later in the bracket, how the fuck do I feel? What the fuck? So it's a pretty big injustice for the team that could be playing like hours after a rule change too. There's a lot of fucking strategy that should go into like prepping for these matches and stuff. Everyone does timings to see where like, okay, we get to this objective at 50 seconds, the enemy team gets there at like a minute 10. So we should be able to set up really, there's a lot of planning and like calculation that goes into these matches. There's a lot of like individual fine tuning as a player that okay, I know that my weapon selection is going to be this. The recoil pattern for this is like this, and I like that because I'm able to kind of control it in this way. That guy could be kicked to using a weapon that he's like, all these other guns are kind of fucking unusable. Like, I don't know really what I'm doing, right? It's like if you had a really big emphasis through Armor Play or whatever the fuck on people using RPGs, and then you changed the handling for all of the RPGs, so you like tripled the drop of all the RPGs suddenly. Or you gave them like randomized, they're super affected by wind. What are we doing? Yeah. So that's kind of what I had pulled from the announcement thing. Basically, none of that is likely to get a response or a fix. But if I can get kind of people to see sort of the same things that I'm seeing, maybe sort of our standards for Season 3 will be higher. And the game will be better. Getting into the ordinary section now of the podcast. Little more low-key, energy-wise. A little less passionate. I'd just like to speak to, over the course of a couple of these episodes, maybe 3 of them, I've spoken to like the state of public play. That's important from a competitive context and framework because competitive context or competitive play should exist in this ecosystem of like the really cool metas and play, really obvious with squad, right? The really cool metas and play from competitive that are developed in that framework, because competitive play should be like high level play, trickles down into the ordinary matches, because now you know that like, oh, these radio positions are really good, and oh, you can attack these objectives from like these specific directions, and that's like the better way to push in, and this is how you handle sort of like the capturing system. We need to not focus on like coastal base Morton. You almost never see any more people go on that West Hill, but they used to be synonymous. Why did that change? Because people spent more time with the game and they kind of developed, and they were like, it's not really important. That doesn't really win us the objective. The name of the game is really pushing through town and getting on the objective now, right? So competitive play kind of exists in this ecosystem. And then two, where does everyone play when they're not in a competitive match or a scrimmage or in a tournament? You play on a public server, right? So like how you play on a public server to a large extent will inform how you play and what you deal with and what you're comfortable with in a competitive context. If you play on a server like WCS and RHS weapons, if that's what you play with all day long and you hate the vanilla weapons, then you're probably going to ask tournament hosts not to play with vanilla weapons because like that just feels garbage to you. So both things kind of have an effect on each other. So I think if we're trying to kind of raise all ships, it's important to speak to both the issues that are inherent within competitive scrimmages and matches and tournaments and stuff, but then also kind of the issues that impact the vanilla game, because again, got to raise all ships. We're going to talk I went through and typed out the typical like philosophical issues and feature issues that people tend to have. Some of them are shared from Squad in the game right now in public play, and then probably downstream in a way competitive play, like what we should expect from tournament matches. And I figured that I would give kind of well-formulated rebuttals to why those things exist and why that's popular and stuff like that. A lot of this is to kind of better formulate competitive players, for some reason, especially in this game, just tend to be fucking cavemen. Just like you're set on measuring yourself against other people and other teams, but then you want as little of a challenge as possible, which is really interesting. So we'll use that to springboard into the first topic, main base protections and why those exist, right? This was really prevalent in Squad. So I've had quite a bit of time to kind of think about it. Okay, if there was a subset of servers that weren't new player friendly for Reforger, for instance, so you're not worried about you're not limiting yourself based on like what's easy for the lowest common denominator, right? You would still arguably want main base protections on even those servers. Here's the argument against having main base protections. Well, it's adding in like tertiary limitation, right? You should just have the skill to handle main base camping the same way that you have to have skill to account for someone camping your supply point that's near the base that you're doing, supply runs for or whatever. Or backcapping, why I'd also philosophically, this underpins why people ban mobile command units, right? The value in for main base protections, value in main base protection kind of stems from, why do we have ordinary objectives on the map in the first place? Why do we have minor, and major objectives? Because you have to have incentives for people to fight over certain areas of the map, right? Just plain and simple. If we were playing on Everon right now, and the west side of the map just basically didn't exist, the map was there, but there were no objectives to fight over, would anyone be in those areas if there was nothing to do over there? Probably not, right? So having objectives in certain areas is an incentive for people to fight over those areas and spend time in those areas and develop those areas. In a game where the enemy isn't always marked on the map, think of like Call of Duty, where the enemy shoots their gun and then they automatically display on the mini-map, right? This game doesn't have that. What's the low challenge, low hanging fruit option for engagement? If I get home from work, I have 30 minutes to play, and I just want to shoot stuff, I'm going to do one of two things. I'm either going to go to a place that I know the enemy will go to, or I'll go to the place that I know the enemy will come from to some degree. And this is why so many people camp supply points. or camp objectives that have nothing to, they're not relevant. They're 5 objectives behind, right? South North Everon, your team could be fighting over Montanak and Hornbeam and like Pinewood, and there will still be 2 or 3 guys that are camping like Simon's Woods or Levy. Like, there's no helicopters coming from there. That guy just doesn't fucking care. Because those are choke points on the map, and they know I've only got 30 minutes to play. I don't give a fuck about my team. I just want to shoot some stuff. I want to play like a cool sniper or whatever, right? So if you're setting incentives, though, for playing over the map in certain areas, I want people to fight over Montanak. So that's an objective. I didn't disable that. I don't want people to fight on Andre's Beacon, because I tend to think that that's a distraction. So I disabled it as an objective. There's nothing there. There's no supplies or anything. You have to address the low-hanging fruit option in people camping main bases. You can't just trust people. We've seen that so far. Everyone will talk about how garbage public play is, and then they'll make a fucking server that's garbage because it doesn't address like a bunch of shit. You're like you're seeing the downstream problems, but you're not looking for the source. Otherwise, half of the team is going to fight over the outskirts of your main base, right? This is a little bit borrowed from Squad. Basically, every server that I've seen in Reforger is wised up, probably because Squad exists to an extent. A lot of players kind of come from Squad, but I haven't seen a single server that didn't have main base protection for either faction. But that is actually pretty common in Squad, probably half and half for the servers. And on the servers where main base protection isn't a thing, where you can camp bases. You can stand right on the outskirts of main base protection, like the invisible wall, and kill people when they step out. Super majorities of the team will do that, and they just won't fight over the objectives. What's the point of the game at that point? Like, it's not about gunplay or like working the terrain or really having fun. Like, you're just being fucking lazy and dumb, I would argue. Next point to address. What is the point of supply points or supply objectives, the little green dots on the map? What's the point of those? It's important to note here that value in running supplies or needing to supply objectives is not the same as asking about the value of supply points. Running supplies for the team is a great concept, but it's brought down by like everything else in the game, right? Aren't they just inherently distractions, even from a positive angle, right? If you're the Soviets and you're just stomping the fuck out of the US team and you're controlling all of the supply points so the US team can't supply their objectives, isn't that still just people on an uncapturable objective? They're often doing nothing until a truck comes by, right? And I'll feed into this point later with another subject because it's kind of a better umbrella to mention it in, but more often than not, that's not the case. You know, you've only got 60 people on your team. You know, from an infantry player's perspective, I think all the time, like, Jesus Christ, this match is fucking dead. Like, it says that there's 60 people on the other team. I'm assuming that there are 60 people on the other team. I don't see them. I maybe see 1 or 2 or 3 people at a time, and that's only if I'm attacking an objective. You know, every time that I'm doing defense on an objective and it gets attacked, say like in the best case scenario, if I'm playing as the US and an objective that's kind of forward or relevant is getting attacked, it's only ever like 5 Soviets. There's 55 other people supposedly on the other team, right? This is a really important thing to address as a problem because it's death by 1,000 cuts, right? There's 5 people on the other team or 5 people on your team that are playing as snipers. and they're 3 miles away from the objective. Even if they're sniping into a relevant objective that's like the base we're attacking, they'll almost never put themselves in like an effective range, you know? They'll put themselves on the really obvious boulder and they'll die 15 times. There's 2 people that are driving across the map right now in armor. They're going to get blown up by a rocket helicopter. There are 10 people that are grinding the rank to get a rocket helicopter. There's maybe 5 people on your team that are doing supply runs, and then there's maybe 5 people on your team that are actively flying rocket helicopters. What the fuck does... And then there's 30 objectives on the map. At any given time, you can have like a 7 to 10 objective front. Just based on radio distances and like reach. What a fucking shit experience. What a terrible... So in the scheme of like cultural acceptance, why am I not getting... If I join into a team, why am I not getting on the guy that I can see, you know... If we're fighting over Montanak, and if I'm the Soviets and I'm on the north side of Evron, right, and we're fighting over Montanak and maybe Provence and Pinewood and like Hornbeam and Andres Beacon, and that's basically our front line. Why am I not getting on the guy that's camping the supply point at Simon's Woods? You know, just south of it, or just east of it? Yeah, like southeast. What the fuck is that guy doing for the team? Is any of the stuff that he blows up there going to affect anything in our region of the map? No. So what are we talking about? Next point. Radio backpacks and the changes that are really needed for them. I've said this, I bring it up all the time because it's incredible that they still haven't done anything with this. So from a competitive perspective, within like tournaments or something, though, we can address this and handle this. It needs to be proximity-based deletion, not interaction-based deletion. It needs to be like squad. You get within 30 meters of a radio backpack and it just deletes itself, right? You don't need to interact with it. If you set it so that way you have to interact with it, you incentivize placing them in ways that you can't interact with them. And then too, sometimes the game is laggy or broken or weird. You're like right next to the radio, but maybe your sound's fucked up or something, you can't quite hear it, and then in that time that you spend like kind of looking for it, you know, people from the radio backpack spawn in and kill you. That just feels weird. It needs to be 6 to 7 spawns per backpack, not the fucking standard 3. I agree that it shouldn't be supply based, that it shouldn't just be like a total number or cache of supplies. But if it's going to be spawn-based, it needs to be more substantial. Radio backpacks should only be available... This is more of a philosophical thing to address with like sort of community sentiment and attempts at trying different things. Radio backpacks should really only be available to supply certain styles of play or intent, right? It shouldn't be for the lone guy or a duo that's camping a supply point with like basically unlimited RPGs. But it should be available for a squad that's doing defense or offense on an objective, right? So maybe this is probably going to be a shit recommendation, but maybe, you know, each objective has 2 different radiuses or radii. You know, it's got a defense radius, which is significantly bigger than the radius that attackers need to be within to capture the objective. So maybe in that similar sense, there's a third not visible really objective. You know, if that, I don't know what the actual distances are for the defense and offense radiuses, but like if the defense radius is like 100 meters and then the offense radius is like 50, then maybe, 200 is a good distance, a 200 meter radius that you can place down radio backpacks from. And maybe that's the only way that radio backpacks are viable. If you try to place one down outside of a radius from either your objective or an enemy's objective that's active or something, I don't know, it just like won't place down or something, maybe you could handle it that way. So that way, if you're maybe, because it's easy to hate on like sniper roles because frequently they don't work with the team, but sniper roles could work with the team. They could work within the framework of a squad. You know, hey, these 5 guys in a jeep are going to go attack this objective, so I'm going to set up kind of beforehand, or I'll meet them there and I'll hit people on that objective from an angle that, you know, isn't expected or whatever the fuck. I think that there's value in that. There's nothing inherently wrong with the role of being a sniper or having an RPG or something like that. It's just typically what's done with it. It's the vacuum of, you know, consequences and incentives. Um, you know, maybe that's also a way to kind of legitimize those roles in the right framework or in the right context. You know, I'm able to set down, you know, if I'm in a little 2-man squad with another guy that's playing sniper or whatever the fuck, I don't agree with that, but you know, maybe there's an incentive for me doing that because I'm placing my radio in the radius of an active objective. You know, so there's probably a better way to account for that, but you get what I'm getting at. The backpack should really just be like a legitimate threat for the area and like a staple tool. You know, the fact that, to be fair, no one really works as a team, regardless of what server you seem to join in pubs, but the fact that radio backpacks aren't used more, or for instance, that like ARCL's banned radio backpacks. Why? That should be like a main tool for an infantry squad in the game. You need to handle it a bit like kind of how I'd argue mortars should be handled. You know, if you're on an objective or you're taking an objective and you see that that the enemy's kind of coming back in from a particular area, say you're doing an attack on an objective, you kill everyone off, you're starting to capture, and all of a sudden you see like 4 or 5 guys that come in from like the east or something like that. And the enemy team doesn't have an objective that's to the east, right? Well, now you know that there's a radio backpack over there, so you kill those guys, you sweep that area, you clear that out. You know, the radio backpack is a consequence for lazy play, and it has positives for pre-planning, right? Like, if I know that the norm in competitive for scrimmages and matches is, hey, what's the 2 map-based things that happen? Defense and offense, right? So if I go to attack an objective and I know that the enemy team is probably placed down like a backup radio spawn off in a corner, so if they lose the objective, they can respawn and try to come back in. That's an incentive and a recognition of skill for me if before we go to attack that objective, we just do a little sweep around the edges, walk through those trees, walk through that bush that's kind of nearby, and then we push in, right? Adds more depth. And dear God, this game needs more fucking consequences for just doing nothing, right? Not doing something right, not giving a fuck. And that's a pretty easy way to like add consequence back in. And then also an incentive and a little bit of depth to like being a squad lead, thinking about that shit, you know? That's just not here right now. Next subject, roles and playstyles that don't really benefit the team, not really, and the need to curate that shit. So this is more specifically like a comment about public servers and the fact that like the only thing that will get you banned or removed or serve as consequence is like if you team kill someone. You could drive vehicles into the fucking ocean and you probably wouldn't get banned. You could dig down all the modules on a base and all the sandbag walls and shit that people built up and you probably wouldn't get banned. Yeah, everything short of fucking digging down like radio towers will just like nobody fucking cares, even if there's admins on your server. So that's kind of what I mean by curation. You know, sifting people out that don't give a fuck. Lone sniper play and kind of lone ambush play is sort of, like I said, I was going to circle back to the point earlier about supply points. This kind of ties into that pretty well. You know, sitting on supply points, sniping on objectives that aren't relevant, like 5 objectives back. You know, not only is that player often not contributing to the team when there's nobody around to snipe, right? If I'm sitting on a supply point in between Chotain and Entredur, and just no one goes to the supply point in 40 minutes, I'm a net loss for my team. Someone else could have been filling my fucking role if it's a full server and having fun and shooting people and shit, right? It's basically like being AFK. Not only is that person not contributing when there's nobody around to snipe or hit with RPGs or whatever. They're often not contributing when someone is around to kill or snipe, right? I gave the example of, like, what's the value of sitting on the supply point next to Simon's Woods if we're all the way on the north end of the fucking map? You're not doing anything that contributes to us. They're not launching helicopters from Simon's Woods. They do that shit on Regina or Mao or Durrus, right? And even then, inevitably they're going to kill you, find you, where you're hiding in a bush, and they'll respawn the fucking helicopter anyways, because supply is like the joke of the game. Oh, it's a really big balancing thing. Supply trucks are worth like 250 supply by default, and they can carry 1,500 supply. You can blow up 5 of the fucking logistics trucks, and all that guy needs to do is make one run, and then it just didn't matter. And then most of the time there's so many objectives that, like, that guy's just going to respawn somewhere else and do the same fucking supply run at a different supply point. Yeah, deaths don't come, unless you're playing something like Escalation, deaths don't come with a cost in the game currently. So, like, even if you're sniping, or you're throwing RPGs from a distance into, like, Simon's Woods, and it's an active objective, your team would like to take that point. If there's no one there to which there rarely is, if there's no one there to capitalize on, like, what you're doing, if there's no bodies to actually put on the point, what's the consequence for dying? I'll give people an opportunity to pause the video and make a guess. Nothing! You spawn back 5 seconds later. There's not even a time consequence. There's a time consequence to killing yourself. There's no time consequence to just shitting the bed on an objective over and over and over and over and over again. You might say, well, you lose the objective supplies. Do you really, though? Does that really matter in the grand scheme of, like I said, a logistics truck costs 250 supplies. It can carry 1,500. All that needs to happen on an objective like Simon's Woods is someone fucking drives in a logistics truck and drops supplies off at the connexes or the shipping containers that are on the other side of the objective from you. And then none of that mattered. Please, dear God, can someone else think about these things? Alright. Next subject / kind of last subject for this section. Like I said, this is going to be a long one. Why do we kick, kill, and ban team killers or griefers? Pause the video, take a second, think about it. Because they have a net negative effect on the match, right? And they ruin fun on a disproportionate level, right? When someone's on a base and they're team killing, they don't team kill one person that's their friend. They team kill everyone in the area. One guy can kill like 7 people. One guy can throw an RPG into a friendly truck full of dudes that were going to go attack an objective, right? And statistically, or experience-wise, there's never only like 1 team killer per match. There's always 3 or 4 of them. Because there's actually so many people that play this fucking game. And then, PC players will just rebuy the game with a different Steam account and come back, or whatever the fuck. Humble Bundle's a thing. That, like, just, you're never, it's whack-a-mole. You're never going to completely get rid of it. So, like, philosophically, that's why team killers and griefers are bad. Just on an instinctual level. Those people are a net negative. They're not adding anything, right? And you can see this in the logical application of unintentional team kills. Or even team kills that were intentional, but they have a positive influence on the match, right? If me and you are on a team and we're defending Simon's Woods, say we're on the US side, and the Soviet team is coming in, and we're struggling, right? You go to look for the bad guys that are on the edge of the objective in a bush. I see from somewhere else on the objective, maybe I'm standing on top of Camo Net or something, I see the guys that you're looking for, and you're standing right next to them, and you just can't see them. I have an RPG in my hand. I will take that shot and kill everyone in those bushes, and it will still be like a positive net experience. You'll respawn. You'll be like, hey, dude, what the fuck? And I'll be like, yeah, you were just standing right next to the guy, so I fucking killed everyone. You'll walk over and be like, you know what? That's fair. I get it. Got it. You'll like repick up your gear or whatever the fuck, and you'll just keep it moving. People will speak to positive balance changes and influencing culture, or, facilitating good matches, right? Server owners, admins, staff, whatever the fuck, people that you talk to. But then they won't address the most common issue that plagues basically every server, right? On one hand, we kick, kill, and ban team kills and griefers that ruin the match for everyone else. On the other hand, we won't do anything to address wasting supplies, digging down base modules, right? Why did you dig down that first aid module? Oh, I needed the supply to spawn in a jeep. You won't punish any of that. Just this one specific thing over here. Do you really give a fuck? You have to ask yourself at some point. Do you really give a fuck about like the integrity of the match? Whether it's fun, right? Because no one's curating anything. No one's fucking kicking these people that obviously don't give a fuck. Are these people donating to you? Are you getting paid? I'd be willing to bet no. Why are you acting like it? Like, these people don't fucking care about your community. They don't care about the community at large. I would offer that this also speaks to, like, quote-unquote, people in the competitive community, right? If your team is giving a tournament host an ultimatum, hey, we don't want to participate if you don't use WCS or RHS guns. Do those people really give a fuck about your community? Or are they just doing something that's convenient? Are they just here? Right? Same thing within these matches. Every server plays like fucking dog shit. Because there's no... You can't opt into a specific experience. Everything is built for the common denominator, for the casual player, right? Which is really fucking interesting, because it just wasn't this way in Squad. In Squad, if you wanted a new player experience, if you were, from a competitive team perspective, if I was recruiting and I wanted people that were explicitly new to the game, because I think that that's like the best bang for buck. You get someone that doesn't have like toxicity issues often. You get someone like in the prime of like them caring about the game. They just bought the thing. They're interested. They want to learn about it, right? In Squad, you would go to the new player servers, and then when you had a bunch of fucking guys and you were just trying to do like some little training thing, or like just trying to get some reps with, playing with a guy, or trying to introduce, more challenge, you would play on the servers that were harder, that curated all those fucking new people away. Potato fields or tactical trigonometry or whatever, right? That just doesn't exist in this game. Every fucking server is like porridge, like bland porridge. There's no ability to opt into like a better experience. If I just want to do infantry play, no fucking helicopters, no armor, smaller maps, I just want to work on gunplay, there's literally no opportunity, no space to do that in this fucking game. It's pathetic. Pathetic. Need to fix that shit. And there will be a fix for it. Now, next section. We're going to leave off here with probably a 10-minute little sort of... I've gone through explicitly, that past section was sort of like big topic subjects. This is just going to be, let's, lightning round, were some of the most common questions that kind of come up in the game, or that us as competitive players should just kind of be asking, and then some answers that I would offer. So, first one, why isn't armor play more common in public matches? Like people using armor to support pushes into objectives, defending objectives from a distance, right? Answer. Everyone can carry a rocket launcher. Anyone can fly a rocket helicopter. Anyone. But there are rank restrictions for rocket helicopters. Yeah, 10 people on your fucking team have been playing for the last 2 hours, and they spawn in the rocket helicopters for you. So how about the next fucking reply? Next question. Why does dying to an attack helicopter feel bad from an infantry perspective? What makes them unbalanced? A little like my, in the answer, a little bit like my issue with automatic fire in the game. I'll get to that in a later question. You end up with like an outsized impact on the area around you with basically no requirement for skill, communicating with your team, knowing the objective and like where people are probably going to be. You can single-handedly demolish an objective ahead of your team pushing in, and there's almost nothing that the defending team can do if it's timed right. Also, just generally speaking, the amount of rockets that each helicopter can carry is fucking stupid. You know, there's a couple of points to kind of dive into here because I'm sure that this is going to make the most people feel some type of way. The number one response that I hear back from both competitive players and public players when I say that I hate rocket helicopters, aside from get good nerd, skill issue, is I don't know what you're talking about. We just swat rocket helicopters out of the air all day long with like armor or rockets. I guarantee you 100% that none of that has ever been in the context of a base actually getting attacked. I guarantee you that your answer and your experience would be different if you selected down from your memory only the instances where you died to a rocket attack on an objective and you couldn't spawn back in. Yeah, rocket helicopters are really easy to deal with if you can just respawn, and on your 7th life, you hit the helicopter with a rocket. I guarantee you wouldn't be thinking about that like that, and I what's the word? God, it's on the tip of my tongue, starts with a P. I implore, we'll say that instead, people to just stand outside of their shoes and just think about that from like a base perspective. If you couldn't just immediately respawn, right? And this is kind of the context that I bring it up in. If you got killed by a rocket, if you're defending Entradur, for instance, or Simon's Woods, you get killed by a rocket helicopter, and the minute the rocket helicopter kills everyone on the objective, just sprays a fucking tree line or kills everyone off the center of the objective or whatever, the enemy team pushes in and now you can't spawn there because it's a contested base. How are you supposed to feel? What are you supposed to do about that? Oh, I guess we just lost the objective. Get fucking real. I've also heard, not that I'm calling anyone out, I'm not going to say names. I've heard, hey, we don't really have to worry about that because we have enough people that on our team or in our group that play armor, so we just explicitly set up to do Overwatch over an objective, and then we just swat helicopters out of the air with armor, and we just never really have an issue with it. That's one objective. How many armor players do you have? Does that, like, lessen the unbalance or the outsized impact that one helicopter can have? That rocket helicopter is going to die. Take Everon, for instance. I don't play Ireland. That rocket helicopter, say the enemy team is attacking coastal base Chotane, and you've got armor set up, and you're just cracking them every time they go to do a rocket run on the base. There are 17 other bases that rocket guy can go attack and get kills on and have an impact on. He's just not going to go back to your base. Yeah. There's probably 4 objectives, because it's always on the east side of the map, because all the objectives are so condensed, right? You fly 5 seconds and you can go from doing a rocket strike on Entradur to Chotane, right? That guy's probably gonna go have an impact somewhere else in your region, and now you gotta fucking like drive the armor away. You're not gonna fucking do that shit. Again, not trying to call anyone specifically out, but I think the conversation for rocket helicopters changes a lot, to be fair, if you're talking about helicopters that can only carry like one or two rockets potentially. And this is just to make the point that like I don't have a spiritual disagreement or dislike or hatred just for rocket helicopters. It is just on the impact that they have in a match that is not underwritten by skill or care or giving a fuck, right? If a rocket helicopter can only carry like one or two rockets, now that pilot has to kind of like maintain that. He's gonna save them, use them sparingly, maybe on like other helicopters or in like a precision strike on an objective, on like an arsenal bunker or a vehicle, for instance. A helicopter does a flyby of Entrador and he sees 5 people that are sitting at the fucking arsenal bunker. Bam, he whips the tail around, fires off one rocket and hits that fucking arsenal bunker, and he's like, fuck yeah, nice. Or he sees like a lav that just got spawned in. He's like, nope, not in my fucking woods, and hits it perfectly, and then just has to go back to main to fucking, reload. That should be what we're aiming for, because that actually requires skill, timing, time and place, forethought. If you do an ordinary rocket strike on an objective, if you only have 1 or 2 rockets, or you just have a fucking, like a Gatling gun or something that doesn't have 5,000 rounds, you choose. Now it's incumbent on you to like actually use what you have meaningfully. Maybe I only do a rocket strike on like 1 or 2 parts of that tree line with my 2 rockets because I can see on the map, or I've communicated with people that like there's guys on my team trying to take that base like 10 meters away. Like they know that a guy is in a tree line, but they can't peek him maybe, so I'm gonna come in and fucking save the day. Shit like that. And if you don't kind of want that, if you have a problem with that, why the fuck would we listen to you? Like I said, competitive play and quote-unquote competitive players simultaneously end up being the bitchiest, girliest, not that anything's wrong with being girly, the biggest pussies of any of the players in game. Well, I can only do that if like I have a scope and fuck off. Probably not actually a competitive player. You're probably just LARPing. Next topic. Question. Why don't people run mortars? Sorry, why don't more people run mortars? And simultaneously, why are people who run mortars wasting their time? Leading question. Mortars are one of the most inefficient and ineffective things that you can do in this game, both from a role and from a time perspective. If you broke down the supply cost to reward ratio, if you took the time to make that, of an attack on an objective with mortars versus an attack on an objective without mortars, you'd see an exponential difference in cost for what often amounts to 0 gain. The dispersion. Obviously, there's a lot that goes into that, distance and whatever the fuck. The forced dispersion for every mortar round makes it a fucking waste of time. Right? If you spend 30 minutes on a mortar and you kill maybe 1 person, Alt F4 out of the fucking game. Stop doing that. You are engaging with a system that does not value your time. Specifically for what I think would really fix that, mortar squad got mortars so fucking right. I'm telling you, I know, take a shot when I compliment squad. Squad really only fucked up like 2 or 3 things. Squad got mortars so fucking right. They shouldn't be pinpoint accurate. You shouldn't be able to hit a window on the side of a building with every single round. But you should be able to kill a guy with every round. You get what I'm saying? Like, if you're aiming for a vehicle that's been sitting still for the last hour, you should be able to blow up that vehicle. Just saying. Or if you're trying to hit a tree line, you should be able to hit the fucking tree line. Not 50 feet away from the tree line. Come on, dude. So I'd like to see significant accuracy increases, you know. And then I'd also like to see, everyone hates fucking nighttime, but if you buffed the usability and the utility of mortar-based flares, I think that you'd see people kind of deal with nighttime. You know, if you're concerned with people that are doing gamma abuse, you just, you know, a fix for that could be your team has a guy that runs mortars, and then, hey, we're trying to really hold on to Entradur, pop a fucking mortar once every, like, 40 seconds over the objective. So I'd like to see kind of significant burn time and then air time for mortar-based flares. I'm sure no one said that ever or thought about that, but... and then, you know, just kind of in general, if your objective is getting hit with mortars, the mortars already have to be within a certain distance of the objective or the thing that you're shooting at, right? So if your objective is getting hit with mortars, that should really kind of, like, mandate dealing with that problem as, like, an immediate thing, you know? If the distance from mortars is basically like, hey, there's mortars on Chotain and they're shooting at Entradur or Montanak. If I'm standing on Montanak, I can hear the tubes firing, because that sound should kind of carry quite a bit of distance. So I kind of know where the mortars are, and we're getting schwacked on this objective. We really need to deal with those mortars. So we're going to send fucking 3 guys to go kill those mortars. And now the mortar people, like, actually have to kind of defend their objective that they're at if they want to keep working, and that just... There's a... Mortar play is just a vacuum of nothingness currently. So even if you added, like, any depth to that, that would be nice, I'd argue, in any direction. Next question. Why does infantry play feel so worthless and stale? Lots of people, especially if you're Joe Schmo, probably haven't really thought about this. But deep in the back of your mind, you know that there's nothing that goes into the gunplay in this game. Answers. There's no incentive or consequence to spending more or less time with the game. My gunplay skills with 5 minutes in the game are the same as my gunplay skills now. 7 months later or whatever. Everything shoots perfectly flat. Recoil patterns are non-existent. Everything can be answered with full auto or smashing the mouse, right? The SVD you should not be able to light through, like, a 10-round magazine in a second with the SVD and kill someone at the end of a fucking hallway. Come on, dude. Also, at any given time, between rocket helicopters, guys using explosives, for instance, RPGs, grenadier rolls, ordinary grenades, AP mines, or armor 3 miles away, which I would just offer as an issue of map design as opposed to the armor itself. You don't matter. At any given time, you don't matter. Your ability doesn't matter. Your skill doesn't matter. 95% of your deaths are from being in the wrong place at the wrong time with no opportunity to deal with the guy that's shooting you. That's an incredible part of why you feel like that. Next question. What makes automatic fire in Reforger inherently unbalanced? I fucking hate it. And it's interesting to think about from a philosophical perspective, because obviously Squad, basically all the guns had full auto, but you would almost never use full auto. I think that balanced well and just wasn't a problem for a couple of different reasons. One, it feels so good to just use semi-auto. and people die in 3 rounds. So like it was never like a trade-off. You weren't like opting into something that would get you killed if you went against a guy that was using full auto. Um, I think that both hipfire before the ICO, hipfire and aiming down sights recoil with full auto was where you kind of wanted it to be. So it really just didn't work out for. Why would you full auto that guy? He's gonna die in 3 rounds anyways. So like the 10 extra rounds you shot at him are just gonna go through him. Probably not even kill someone behind him. Um, and then two, it was balanced with magazines, right? You could only carry so many magazines in squad. So ammo management was its own sort of mini economy. One Reforger, you can carry 20 magazines. So it just never matters. Sorry, my throat's starting to get a little sore. There's no requirement for skill or forethought with full auto in Reforger, regardless of what gun you have. Good aim, pre-planning, positioning, trying to sideswipe people, none of it matters if you know that you can just kind of hold down a button and one of those bullets will inevitably kill the enemy. You can spray through camo nets and bushes and tents. That just becomes the norm. If you aren't doing that, if I'm doing defense on an objective and I get the notification that someone's capturing the base, the enemy's capturing the base, if I don't full auto spray through every bush that could have an enemy, I'm choosing to not do the logical, efficient thing there. Large magazine sizes contribute also to an unbalanced impact in the area, right? If I have the saw and I'm not just dumping everything, again, I'm choosing to not do the most efficient thing in the game. The saw is the most broken garbage inclusion that they fucking have. Because it has no recoil and it's a laser beam at 600 meters. It's ridiculous. Next question, last question. What is the value of base building in a competitive context? Pause the video, take a second, think about it. Should you be able to build bases, flesh stuff out, sandbag walls, camo nets? Does that really matter for like pacing and stuff in a competitive context? In this, ARCL Season 2, if in my match I take 5 guys and we've super fob an objective, is that value? Does that make it better? Is that really like significant increase? Should there be any limits to that? Depends on what we're talking about, doesn't it? We're talking about base building? Or are we talking about placing objectives or placing objects on an objective, right? If I want to break up line of sight on something like Simon's Woods, should I be able to place down a bunch of fucking camo nets so now you can't snipe me from like 600 meters away? Yeah, probably. That's a legitimate strategy. That's a way to like deal with an issue for the map area. That requires like some forethought, some skill, some accounting. Should I be able to build a super base that's like impossible to attack with like razor wire everywhere? Probably not, right? Like at that stage, what's the game about? That's probably kind of not where that needs to be. But anyways, it's gonna be me for this. Actually didn't end up being the longest episode, which is kind of nice. Thanks for sticking with me if you're still here. Shout out to my 7 or 8 real homies. They're all fucking team leads. Thank you. And join the Discord, because we can't reach out to individual teams